Good morning, I'm Stephanie Ritter, and I'd like to share a little bit about my climate journey. My personal dark tunnel of climate despair came in 2018 when several things converged. First, our government was ignoring science and took us out of the UN Paris Climate Agreement. Next, I noticed the newsletters and emails I received on climate news were increasingly dire. And finally, and more personally, I had a very large tree cut down in my yard, which I later regretted. Basically, I wasn't much fun to be around when the topic of climate change came up. Then in September of 2019, I found a Time magazine in my school's library that was called The Climate Issue and was titled, How Earth Survived. The main story was written by climate activist and author Bill McKibben and was called Hello from the Year 2050. We avoided the worst of climate change, but everything is different. It was the first time I actually allowed myself to imagine a world where the results of our collective efforts actually began turning things around. To do this, it was presumed that America elected a different president in 2020, Congress began acting on the principles of the Green New Deal, and the world was able to get to net zero carbon emissions. It was exhilarating to read, even if it was only fiction at the time. And it allowed me to see life from the other side of the dark tunnel I was in. After that, I started looking for other sources of inspiration. During COVID, I found the podcast, How to Save a Planet, where every episode ended with actions that listeners can take. From the podcast, I was introduced to climate scientists like Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, who gives talks to congregations and civic groups about the climate. And of course, I kept myself surrounded by friends on the NSUC Green Team who always inspire me with ideas and actions. But lately, I feel an urgency to do more now that our country is committed to a climate plan. Yes, I eat less meat, I recycle all I can, I get my electricity from a community solar farm, and I vote for environmentally minded candidates. But I also have a suburban home, fly at least once a year, and drive a gas-powered car. I often feel guilty that I'm not doing more, and I know I'm not alone. The average American produces 16 tons of carbon dioxide a year. This is a small part of the 6 billion tons that the US emits every year. So what I do or don't do doesn't really seem to matter much. This can leave a person feeling pretty hopeless. However, as the quote in our order of service states, the opposite of hopelessness is not hope, but action, especially collective action that creates hope. So I've started to think of my actions for the climate like a ripple of water as it goes out in concentric rings from its source. I got this idea from Professor Leah Stokes in the book called All We Can Save. So I began with what I can do personally. I try to do many things, but I really get energy from the things that excite me. Reducing food waste is one of those things. I enjoy composting food waste, both indoors with worms and at a larger scale outdoors. This keeps food out of landfills where it would otherwise decompose into methane, a greenhouse gas which is 30 times worse than carbon dioxide. However, if that's all I do, I realize I'm limiting myself in the impact I can have. So the second ripple in my water analogy is taking my personal actions to the community level. I try to talk about composting and food waste whenever I can. We all should chat about the climate like we talk about the weather, but suggest solutions rather than just complain. Research shows that 90% of Americans are not climate deniers, but some are climate doomers. So your neighbor might be worried about the climate just like you are. If we hesitate to bring up an intimidating topic like climate change, we miss the opportunity to bond with others about a shared concern and the opportunity to inspire each other. After the service today, try asking someone what climate action they're taking this year. Now, the third ripple becomes taking my climate actions to the organizational level. I've joined groups like the NSUC Green Team, Clean Power Lake County, the World Wildlife Fund, and the Nature Conservancy. These groups help me understand the important actions I can take collectively. The money I donate to some of these organizations also helps them fund their work. Even though I actually enjoy doing my own composting, I would love to see my village of Buffalo Grove offer curbside composting like some of the surrounding communities already do. Maybe the change I'm waiting for is actually me banding together with a local group to move this idea forward. And finally, the last ripple is policy change, and I definitely cannot do this alone. This is key to tackling climate change in the time frame we need to. What policies could I try to change? Again, my involvement with the organizations of my choice can guide me. Maybe I campaign for a climate-friendly candidate, or perhaps make phone calls with the Environmental Voting Project. I already receive email updates from the NSUC Legislative Action Team that alert me to issues at the state or federal level and guide me to contact my representatives. There are no shortage of ways to get involved, and you can get ideas from the Green Team Action Challenge checklist. After this service, we'll hand you one. I hope that I can make it to 2050 and look back and see that we averted the worst of climate change by coming together in this decade. I will feel proud of humanity for working hard collectively to turn things around. In my vision and that of Bill McKibben, we will have all renewable energy, electric transportation, responsible ways to handle our waste, recovering ecosystems, a just society, and an equitable economy with a government that helped us to get there. It's a vision that continues to inspire me and fill me with hope and carry me forward in the work to create an even better world than we have today. Choosing climate hope is not just good for my mental well-being, but it's good for the well-being of everyone.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was awesome. When I was a child, I spent much of my time outdoors, and in particular, quite a bit of time laying on my belly, watching all the little creatures crawling in the grass, or laying on my back, watching clouds and the tree leaves blowing in the wind, or sitting with my back against a tree. It was all that time in direct contact with the earth that gave me a profoundly deep connection to the earth and all her beings. They were my best friends, and today I still feel that they are my kin. That is why I became an ecologist, why I have a passion for environmental work, and I recently started my business as a climate action coach. It is also what causes me to literally feel the earth's pain and to grieve it as if it were my own. Climate grief, overwhelm, and fear and despair sometimes creep up on all of us. Still, I am here to offer you a break from climate doom and serve up a heaping helping of climate hope. So here's how I keep my own hope alive, or to fuel my work. First, I stay focused on the belief that we can do this difficult thing. Science tells us we have what we need to reach our goals. We have the knowledge, the skills, the expertise, and now even the funding. I'll tell more about that in a bit. Humans also chronically underestimate what can be, because they get stuck in what is, what they see right in front of their faces, we see in front of our faces. For example, many people didn't think that electric vehicles would ever be practical because they couldn't imagine how to get past the range limits. They couldn't imagine a network of fast charging electric vehicles, charging stations across the US. And people didn't think that youth would become a force for climate action until Greta Thunberg inspired millions of young people around the world to become climate activists, dramatically raising awareness of climate change and catalyzing global climate action. Also, the rate of innovation is not linear. Not everything behaves when I talk to it, so I'm glad that it's staying. So the rate of change is not linear, it's exponential. There's this long nose of innovation, as it's been dubbed, where it looks like nothing's happening. It's that time period when people are going, oh no, there's a problem. We need to do something about this problem. What do we do about this problem? Oh, here's some solutions. Now, who's going to do it, and how are they going to do it, and what are the resources that we need? And all of that is sort of underground. You don't really see it until all of a sudden there's an inflection point when all of that groundwork has been laid and things start moving. It is my contention that we are at that inflection point, that X mark on the curve, and that this next decade is going to be the most amazing decade to be alive on the planet because of all the amazing innovations that will be happening. This gives me great hope. Second, I keep my eyes open for reasons to hope. We know that the news media specialize in disaster reporting, right? Because that's what sells. So they rarely report positive climate news. And as it turns out, there's a pretty decent amount of good news to report. So here are some of my favorites. 1, weather is not climate. Let me explain why that offers me hope. Weather is like the money in your pocket on a day-to-day basis, or the daily balance in your checking account or your savings account. It's what happens on a daily or weekly basis. Climate is like the changes in your overall net worth. It takes time to see the pattern. It's the long-term pattern that we see over a decade, or maybe 2 or 3 decades. That's climate. This year's weather is much hotter because of El Nino, a periodic weather pattern that raises temperatures. But El Nino is predicted to fade in the spring of 2024. And that means that's a really good chance that the temperatures next year in 2024 are actually going to be cooler on average than the temperatures this year. It is important that we keep the average global temperature under 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And you may hear news, that disaster reporting, that says that we might reach 1.5 degrees Celsius this year or in a few years. But don't get spooked by that, because that's just one day or a few days or a week. It's not an overall climate pattern. So when you hear the stories, take a deep breath, breathe deeply, and know there's still time. We still have time. In the political arena, there's amazing, hopeful news. Australian voters rejected the climate denial of the previous leadership and instead elected a prime minister who is committed to climate action and making Australia a renewable energy superpower. Wow. And in Brazil, which contains the vast majority of the Amazon rainforest, right? Voters recently elected President da Silva, who has an outstanding track record from about 8 years ago of preserving and regenerating rainforest. That means that 2 of the worst climate-denying nations in the world have switched. They've converted to climate action. That is huge. In the corporate arena, many major companies are realizing that climate action is actually cost-effective. And so they're making the changes, and those changes are preferred by many investors. Strong move, a strong motivation. There's the rapid rise of renewable energies, which are now the fastest growing energy sector in the US, and the rapid death of the coal industry. And just this week, this blew my mind, 7 major auto manufacturers came together and announced an unprecedented plan to share technology and to collaborate on the creation of a US network of 30,000 electric vehicle fast charging stations across the country. That is a game changer. Yeah, thank you for the whistle, I agree. All those are good? Even more hopeful are the 2 bipartisan laws passed by Congress in the last year and a half that invest heavily in climate solutions. The Inflation Reduction Act dedicates $360 billion to green energy and climate solutions, and 40% of that is dedicated for environmental justice communities. Yes. The bipartisan infrastructure law, not to be outdone, dedicates $1.2 trillion to green infrastructure improvements, things like upgrading the electrical grid, which is an absolute requirement for this all to work. So this, and by the way, there are tax credits and tax rebates that will be, the rebates will be rolling out in the fall for buying electrical appliances and electric vehicles. Those, I'm sorry, not electric vehicles, but electric appliances and electric HVAC. But they're going to roll out. It's taken about a year to get the infrastructure in place for that, but they're rolling out. And next year you can take tax credits if you buy an electric vehicle this year. And those tax credits will be available over 10 years. This level of investment is unprecedented and it's game-changing, and it has already dramatically catalyzed the US renewable energy, electric vehicle, and electric grid industries, among other industries. But it gets even better, because when other countries realized what we were doing and how we were positioning ourselves to be the leaders in these industries, they all said, wait a minute, we want a piece of this pie too. And so they have started writing and passing legislation and regulations to move into these industries as well. Who would have thought that capitalism could be the ally of climate action? Who knows? Now, I need you to understand that I am not being naively cheerful here. I am keenly and painfully aware of the danger embodied in this situation. It's just that I refuse to see that danger as the only vision for the future. Because embedded in every crisis, as is indicated on the front of your order of service, embedded in every crisis is an opportunity to use the turbulence that the crisis caused as a springboard for creating an even better world. In the darkest times in my life, I have learned to focus on the best possibility, the best vision of what could be, and it has served me well. The future is never predetermined. It is created by the actions that we take in this moment. If we let the circumstances around us dictate our vision of the future now, we might indeed be doomed, along with future generations. There's nothing like hopelessness and despair to stop people from taking climate action or any action, especially creative, proactive action. So I offer this question. What if we let go of the idea that we are doomed and instead see this climate crisis as an opportunity? What could we begin then to envision and to create? We know that things will be different in 10 years, 15 years, 50 years, different in pretty much every way. There's no going back to the way things were, but that's actually a good thing, because the way things were wasn't working for most of humanity and for the natural world. So we have an opportunity. Things do not have to be the worst kind of different. They can be the best kind of different. It usually takes a crisis to move humans to take radical action, but crises also cause us to correct the mistakes that created the crisis. So we can choose to see the climate crisis as an opportunity, a catalyst for political, environmental, and social justice progress. To address the root causes of climate change, we will need to create a world that is more environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, and socially just. I mean, heck, if everything's going to be different anyway, then let's radically innovate. Third, I practice active hope. If we give in to the oppression of negative feelings, we will give up on taking action. Giving up means we will give over our future and the future of all beings on the planet, and that will guarantee that the outcome will be the worst kind. In their book, Active Hope, Now How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy, I love that title, Joanna Macy and Chris Johnston write, active hope is about becoming active participants in bringing about what we hope for. Active hope is a practice. Like Tai Chi and gardening, it is something we do, not something we have. They call this practice the spiral of work that reconnects, and it has 4 movements. First, practice gratitude, a deeply spiritual practice that has nourished my life, particularly in difficult times. When we practice gratitude, we also become alive to the world. Second, honor our pain. Feelings like grief, despair, sadness, and outrage are perfectly normal and sane responses to witnessing the pain of others, including the earth. If we didn't care, we wouldn't have those feelings. So our feelings remind us of how much we care about the earth, about this amazing being that we call Mother Earth. The third movement is seeing with new eyes, seeing that what we've done to the web, we've done to ourselves, but also seeing a new vision for what can be. And the fourth movement is to go forth, to connect with others who care and take collective action, to be the change we want to see. I call it creating climate hope. Finally, I remember that there are children and beings right now and in the years to come who are counting on us and who believe in us. I know that if I am not part of the solution, I will be part of the problem. And even though I cannot do everything, I can and I must do what I can do, and then level up again. Morgan Florsheim says, we're talking about degrees here. So there's no point at which we can no longer make the future better than it would otherwise be. We know what we need to do, and we have what we need to do it, but we have to take action now. In 2020, I had the extraordinary opportunity of going to Mexico to the wintering grounds of the monarch butterflies. It was a profound experience. Standing there, I saw that the monarch butterflies cluster on the branches of pine trees, and they do that to share body heat. When they do, they bend the branches down. And then in the morning, when the sun comes up and heats the butterflies and they start to cascade down from those branches, if you put your hands up behind your ears, you can hear the butterflies, and they sound like the wind blowing in the pine trees. I love this metaphor. A single monarch butterfly that you see here seems fragile. It is fragile. It has almost no weight. It is silent. But when they come together in community, they make a wondrous sound and they reshape their world. May we here in this community also take collective action to make a wondrous noise, to reshape our world for the better, and to create climate hope in the service of the earth and all her beings, in the service of the next 7 generations, and in the service of the highest good. May it be so. Thank you.